Anita Bryant's anti-gay crusade dramatically altered the trajectory of my guest's life. We'll find out in this episode of The Nicholas Snow Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the season premiere of the Nicholas Snow Show. I am your host, Nicholas Snow. PromoHomo.TV expanded in the summer of 2020 into a full-fledged online broadcast network with 5 series. Thank you for your support. Anita Bryant's anti-gay crusade dramatically altered the trajectory of not only Ronni Sanlo's life, but the lives of her children as well. What happened in the decades, in a lifetime sense, is nothing short of remarkable and immensely inspiring, as we will hear from Ronni herself in this episode. And I frankly know how inspiring Ronni is because I know her. And we know a lot of the same really cool people who are undoubtedly tuning in right now. So I just want to give a shout out to all of Ronnie's friends and my friends who have tuned in. But wherever you are in the world, this is definitely a powerful story that you're going to want to stay tuned to. Before we get on to the main event, I wanted to take the opportunity to update you on some really exciting things that are going on here with PromoHomo.TV. First of all, for their support, I really want to thank DAP Health, formerly Desert AIDS Project. They've just changed their name because the bulk of their clients are no longer living with HIV. They're serving the broader community here in the Coachella Valley. I'm living powerfully with HIV, and I've been a client of DAP for about 10 years, and it's been a big difference in my life. So thank you, DAP. And I want to shout out for the support of 849 Restaurant and Lounge right here in Palm Springs. My favorite menu item right now is the Blueberry Brie Monte Cristo, which has turkey. Now I have something to share with you about you. Did you know that you are 100% organic? What on earth does that mean? Okay, so my audience, the audience of this show, is 100% organic. What that means is I have not paid money to boost my programming across social media. I used to actually share my episodes after they broadcast to like 50 Facebook groups. I'm not doing that anymore. What I'm doing is I'm relying on you to see the value in the show and to subscribe to me across social media and to share the broadcast. And that is why you are a 100% organic audience. And I just believe in attraction rather than promotion. But I do have some PromoHomo reality coming up before I stop doing that. Merch, official PromoHomo.TV merch is now on Amazon, or you can find the link at PromoHomo.TV. Now, if you should buy the merch, take a photo of yourself, upload it to Instagram, and tag at PromoHomo.TV, because I am going to put photos in the show of people wearing the merch. I want to let you know that in June of 2021, this year, I'm going to launch a new program on the PromoHomo.TV network that's episodic in nature. And I'm basically going to go through my book, Life Positive, A Journey to the Center of My Heart. It's a Living Powerfully with HIV memoir. It takes place predominantly in Asia. It's an edge of your seat adventure written as I lived it. And I'm going to go through that book an episode at a time. Hopefully, I'll go through the whole book between June and World AIDS Day, which is December 1st. So I invite you to tune into that. One of the things that happens in the book is the creation of this music video campaign. So search YouTube for The Power to Be Strong and my name, or ask your smart speaker to play The Power to Be Strong by Nicholas Snow, and you'll find that song. If any of you are out there, this is very promo homo. If any of you out there are in casting, I'm available for auditions. You're seeing me as a host right now, but my movie and TV commercial acting clips are right there. And finally, I really want to thank the PromoHomo.TV superstars. The PromoHomo.TV superstars are people who subscribe to the network for as little as $3 a month. And I put the most recent superstars in the opening credits sequence that you're about to see. But more importantly, all of my subscribers are listed in the superstars page at PromoHomo.TV with an optional hyperlink to the webpage or social media of your choice. I think that's really cool. So that's all the promo homo you're getting out of me today. And coming up next, my very special guest, Dr. Ronni Sanlo. Oh, 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 I knew that a lot of people that both Ronni and I know and love would tune in today. So Valerie Milano is watching from LA. She's the publisher of HollywoodTimes.net. She did see the documentary that is about Ronnie's life, and Valerie says it's a great documentary. My friend RJ is watching from the Philippines. She usually does. And Joy Silver, power lesbian and activist and all-around amazing person, is watching. I love you too, Joy. One of our favorite local lesbians here in the desert, Barbara Carpenter. So nice to see you, Barbara. Well, sort of. And my friend Paul is actually nearby. He lives in LA, but evidently he's watching me in Cabazon. So from the Philippines to Cabazon, the audience, and to LA, the audience is here. So, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Anita Bryant's anti-gay crusade dramatically altered the trajectory of not only Ronni Sanlo's life, but the lives of her children as well. What's happened in the decades, in a lifetime sense, is nothing short of remarkable. Author, LGBT historian, and playwright Dr. Ronni Sanlo is the Director Emeritus of the UCLA Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Center and a frequent keynote speaker and consultant on LGBT issues in higher education. Now retired, I have to laugh at that. When you hear her, there's nothing retired about her. Dr. Sanlo was also professor and director of the UCLA Masters of Education in Student Affairs. Prior to coming to UCLA in 1997, Dr. Sanlo was the director of the LGBT Center at the University of Michigan. In a previous life, Dr. Sanlo was an HIV epidemiologist in Florida from 1987 to 1994. Ronni earned a bachelor's degree in music at the University of Florida and a master's and doctorate in education from the University of North Florida in Jacksonville. She developed the initial standards and guidance for LGBT work in higher education and was founding chair of the Consortium of LGBTQ Professionals in Higher Education. Ronni is the originator of the award-winning Lavender graduation, a commencement event that celebrates the lives and achievements of graduating LGBTQ college students. So clearly, the headline talks about how Ronni survived Anita Bryant, but she actually has thrived in so many ways. And here to learn more about her journey, to help us learn more, is Ronni. Hi, Ronni.
Hi, Nicholas. Thank you so much. This is exciting.
Well, your fans are out in force, tuning in.
My friends.
Yes, they're your friends, and people from all walks of life. But there's a lot of power lesbians in your circle.
Well, in order to do this kind of work, you have to be around other people who do this kind of work. We motivate one another to continue on, even when continuation seems futile. So we're all there for one another.
Light attracts light.
Yes.
All right. So a lot of people are aware of Anita Bryant because she was so visible and horrific in terms of the outcomes that she caused. And I was wondering, there's, of course, been the documentary film Letter to Anita and your play, Dear Anita Bryant,
right, that
address this story. But I was wondering if you would, in your own words, talk a little bit about what happened to you in Florida as a result of Anita Bryant.
Sure. Anita Bryant did her thing in Miami there are a couple of interesting things. First of all, she was involved in a church in Miami, and the church wanted to, and Miami had just passed an LGBT, or at the time, lesbian, gay, non-discrimination ordinance in Miami-Dade County. And her church was absolutely opposed to that. And because she was well known, they asked her to lead this concept called Save Our Children. And she was quite successful. I mean, within 6 months, voters actually repealed the new ordinance, and it was gone. And she got so much press from that, and her press-hungry husband, Bob Green, thought that they could ride this anti-gay thing into a financial future. And so she started moving all around the country, actually doing anti-gay work. Ironically, and I'll come back to where I fit in, but ironically, as she was doing this work, a few years later, by 1980, she wasn't very popular any longer, nationally and internationally, and her husband divorced her. The church that had been supporting her basically kicked her out because divorce was not something that the church believed in. And also, ironically, the pastor's daughter was a lesbian. So all of those things were
homosexual who was a child of a pastor. I just can't believe it.
Really. So while all that's going on, I'm happily married in that I just needed to stay within myself. I never let my feelings out. I never shared that I was a lesbian. I knew, from the time I was 11 years old, I'd fallen in love with Annette Funicello, the best Mouseketeer ever. But I couldn't tell anybody. I didn't want to be that different from my family. And so I just kept it in. And when my grandfather said, you're almost 25 and you're not married, what are you, funny or something? I thought, holy crap, he figured it out somehow, and I got to get married. And so I married a guy that I dated in college.
I wish I had married a guy that I dated in college. You one up on me for that one.
Well, actually, I wish I had married the girl that I was in love with in college,
I
but
understand.
that didn't happen. So I got married, and I just stayed, emotionally, intellectually sequestered. The women's movement was marching past me. When Anita Bryant was doing her thing in '77, I refused to look at the television set. I lived in Florida. I was outside of Orlando, and I refused to look at the television set. I couldn't watch it because my own self-hatred in my own closet was just suffocating me, and so I couldn't watch her. And so as all of this is just moving beyond me, the Florida legislature in 1978, the next year after Anita Bryant got that the ordinance repealed, the Florida legislature, to honor her, passed the very first anti-gay law in the state, and that was basically saying, and I think they didn't have a sense that lesbians and gay men could have biological children. So what the law said was homosexuals may not adopt. And the point was so that we couldn't get our hands on kids. So when
ludicrous.
Exactly.
Ludicrous.
So when I was divorced in '79 and we're sitting in court, the judge said, because of my homosexual lifestyle, I could not have custody of my children, nor could I have fair visitation. And he invoked the new law that had been passed the year before in '78. So I lost custody. My visitation was one day every 2 weeks, and a day selected by my ex-husband. So I never knew what day that was going to be. And it was just, and my kids were 3 and 6 at the time. They were very young. And this went on for 6 years. Well, in that 6-year period of time, I had become the executive director and lobbyist of the Florida Lesbian and Gay Civil Rights Task Force. And there were a bunch of other anti-gay laws that had, especially affecting higher education, that had come before the legislature and ultimately the Florida Supreme Court. And we fought those. I mean, we fought those tooth and nail, and actually won every battle that we had during that time. And it was during the Equal Rights Amendment period of time. It was the early '80s, and it really was, it was quite exciting, frightening, but exciting. But the organization for which I worked had run out of money. People weren't donating. We had no money. And I was unemployed. And then I was homeless. I was living on the street for a period of time.
I thought I remembered, I don't know if it was in the play or the movie or in a personal conversation. Did you live under a bridge?
Yes. Yeah. The only place I really felt safe in the world at that time, and I couldn't tell my family of origin had moved to California a number of years earlier, 10 years earlier. And I couldn't tell them what was going on with me. I was ashamed. I had so much shame. And so the only place I really felt safe in the world was Key West. And so I went south. I actually had silver from my wedding. My mother had given me service for 12. Like, we lived in poverty anyway. I mean, I'd never have a place where 12 people could even fit. But I had this silverware, and so I sold it piece by piece, and that's what I lived on during the time I was homeless. So, I'm not a drug person. I didn't do drugs. I didn't even know drugs. And I didn't have to prostitute for money. I had these individual pieces of silverware. So anyway, I bought a bus ticket and I went down to Key West, and I lived there was a bridge, and there were a bunch of people who lived under this bridge. And we would get up every morning and hitchhike or ride bikes. I had a used bike I found under the bridge, and we'd ride into Key West and either panhandle, or I actually got a job hawking timeshare for one of the hotels. I mean, it was ridiculous. But the ironic thing is, 10 years later, when my son was homeless, he lived under the same bridge. And he and I didn't know that until he moved out to Los Angeles again 10 years later and lived with me, and he and I were sharing stories, and it was just remarkable.
Hey,
But
Mom, we lived under the same bridge.
we did.
I
It was
mean,
a
I mean, was that like a goosebumps MG moment?
Well, we had so many of them, he and I, when we first reconnected, for so many reasons. And, that somehow that just sort of made sense to both of us. He lived in Key West. He lived under this bridge. He made jewelry out of hemp, and that's how he survived down there. I mean, it was just crazy. Um, but some friends saw me there and took me back to Orlando, and found a place for me to live with someone. And I was able to get a job, and minimal job, but it was a job with a company that recruited people for jobs, and a job came across the desk that I thought I could do, so I applied for it and I got it. And it was decent money, and it had a car because I had no car. And so now I had a car and I had a job, and so things started moving forward for me from there. But actually, my next job was, and I got fired from that job for being a lesbian, which I hated. I hated that I got, because I'd been fired so many times. I was fired repeatedly from jobs because I'm a lesbian, and I couldn't keep my mouth shut about it. And I was a raving activist. And I did a radio show one time with a friend. I had a friend who was a DJ, and I can't remember his name now, in Orlando. But he invited me to be a guest host DJ one night, and I invited a friend to come with me, another woman. And we were the lesbians who were doing this. We were DJing this program. And what we said on the air was that we were doing this program in the nude, which we were not. But that's what we said. And it turned out to be quite an exciting evening.
And that's how you started your career as a nude DJ. You left that out of the book.
There's so many things that, when I think back, the good news for me is that I'm going to be 74 in a couple of weeks, and at least my memory is still intact. So I'm grateful for shows like this, Nicholas. So it helps me remember. But actually, the job that changed my life, truly changed my life, was that when I was unemployed, a friend of mine named David Jones came to visit me. I was living in Miami, and he said, "We need you up in Jacksonville, that the federal government has given money to metropolitan areas for AIDS surveillance, or AIDS epidemiology, really." And because of the job I'd just been fired from, I knew how to read medical records. And so he invited me to come up, and I applied. And I got the job, and I, was suddenly the highest ranking lesbian in Florida government, which wasn't that high, but it was, I milked that one. And part of that job was paying for school. So my entire graduate program, my master's, my doctorate, my dissertation, all of that was all paid for by the state, who took my children away from me. So I always appreciate the irony of that.
Now, I want to go back to the way that you ended up being separated from your kids.
Right.
Your in-laws, if I remember correctly, were extremely religious.
Oh, they were so religious that they owned their church. They left the Southern Baptist Church because it was too liberal.
Okay.
Yeah. So
they complicated the visitation, and they basically helped turn your children against you.
Absolutely. In fact, at one point, one day that I had, it was a visitation day, and Michael Jackson was performing in Jacksonville, and my son, who was 8 at the time, loved Michael Jackson, and so I took him to the store, and we bought him the parachute-looking pants, and a little honeycomb type shirt, and a glove, and a little black studded belt. And he loved it. And he just knew he looked so spiffy. And when I took them home later in the day, and I had to take them to their grandparents' house, his grandmother made him take his clothes off, and in front of him cut them up with scissors. And and told her it was because I was such an evil person and made him wear these evil clothes. So that they would just say terrible, terrible things about me. So when my kids were 9 and 12, at that point, the age of consent in Florida was 12. So my daughter would have been allowed to make the decision of whether or not she wanted to live with me or live with her father. And we had never, ever talked about that. That was never a consideration. But apparently it was in their family, in her grandparents' household. And so at that point, I was working in the AIDS program, and they told my kids, they said, because I'm a lesbian, which I didn't hide at all, because I'm a lesbian and because I work with people with AIDS, I must have AIDS. And if they touch me or hug me or kiss me, they're going to get sick and die. And so the next time I had my kids, they were so distant, and they kept saying they didn't want to go to the hospital, they didn't want to die, and they wanted to go back home. So, and it was because I wanted to know if I had AIDS. So, it was just another type of fallout from the AIDS program and the whole pandemic itself. And then from there, I didn't see my children again for many years until they were adults and returned to me.
Yeah, that's just it's, even though I know the story, it's just so heartbreaking to hear. I don't know if you noticed this when I put it on the screen, but RJ says, "What a life story, heartbreaking, but how you managed to survive out of your pain is so inspiring."
Oh, thank you, AJ. The reality is I think we all can survive something. And, I don't know why. I don't know why I made it through some of the things that I made it through. All I know is ultimately I was called to do the work that I did in higher education. I truly believe I was called to do that work, and I could not have done that work, and I couldn't do what I do now in my retirement had I not experienced that horrible stuff that happened initially. It just sort of set a foundation for what I needed to do to be with and to help and support young people in my life who were not my children. They were other people's children. But working in the AIDS program did that for me too, because there were so many young people, my kids' ages, who were dying. I mean, I had people dying every single day, and I would hold their partners, or I would hold their mothers, or deal with people who were glad to see them gone, which just killed me. But the stories I have from that 7 years of working in the AIDS program, really pretty much at the height of the AIDS pandemic, forever changed my life, And everything I do in memory of all of those sweet young people we lost.
Well, in some ways we have this in common, because I was a student in the early 80s at Arizona State University when the HIV/AIDS epidemic, what would become known as, showed up, and I was a communications major. And the message that really hit home for me, that has defined my life, is that the greatest power I have is my own voice and my own truth, and the ability to express it. And it is even more powerful when you're expressing life experience and truth and light into an environment where there's tremendous darkness, ignorance, hate, and bigotry. And it is the role of people like you and hundreds of people we know, and hundreds of thousands of people that participated, that bring about these shifts. I'd like to hone in a little bit on how the Lavender graduation specifically came about the first time, and what it was like for the people there.
Okay, great question. So I got the job as the LGBT Center director at the University of Michigan in May of '94. I started there. I didn't know those kinds of jobs even existed, but I was 47 years old. I was a new professional in higher ed. And I was going to do this work that, as I said earlier, I just knew I was called to do. And so I got to Michigan, and it was May, and it was commencement week when I started. And I saw so many students of color with these beautiful kinty cloth stoles that they were wearing. And so I was asking different people, what all of that meant. And they said, well, the African-American students had a graduation that honored them. And there were a lot of First Nation students there as well. And they had stoles that honored them. And I thought, that's such a cool idea. And I'm going along, and school's starting in the fall, and students are telling me that, while Michigan is a great school, from an LGBT perspective, their lives had been miserable on campus, and they just couldn't wait to graduate and get the hell out. And I thought, college is such an important time, and it's such a wonderful time. And I wanted to create something that was going to give them a last good taste of their college education, that was going to say to them, you matter to the academy, and you are important to the people coming up behind you. You need to be active alumni for new LGBT students coming up. So that was my purpose, were those three things. I ran it by the dean of students. She thought it was a great idea. I called it Lavender graduation because, okay, I'm not an artist, but I know, as many of you do, that gay men in Nazi Germany had to wear the pink triangle. Lesbians, unless they were Jewish, wore the black triangle, which was indicating that they were political prisoners. And so I took the pink triangle and the black triangle and combined them to create Lavender. Except that those of you who are artists out there know that pink and black don't create lavender. I didn't know that. I thought it was a great idea. So that's why I called it Lavender graduation. And I got lavender stoles and lavender tassels. Now they're all rainbow. But I bought the equipment from David Goodman, who owns a queer stuff company. And we advertised that we were going to do this event during commencement week. 3 students were willing to participate. A guy named Ryan Bradley in Los Angeles was Lavender.
What year was this?
1995. It was May of 95.
In 1995, there were still only 3 students that wanted to participate.
Oh,
and
yeah.
this was in Michigan.
This was in Michigan.
Okay.
And so there were the 3 students, a couple of their friends, the dean, and myself. That's all that were there. But, I'm sort of, I can be the queen of bullshit when I need to be. And so we did a lot of after advertising about how fabulous this was and how wonderful people felt and blah, 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 and started right away planning for 1996. Well, my last Lavender grad at Michigan was in 97, and we had almost 100 students participating.
2 years later.
2 years later, yeah. And so when I went to UCLA in the fall of 97, our first Lavender grad at UCLA was in the spring of 98.
Okay.
And now there are probably 500, 600, 700 universities around the country. There are 3 universities who are doing their very first Lavender grad in April, and I'm the keynote speaker at all 3 of them. I'm very excited about that. That always makes me cry.
Well, I think that's wonderful. Speaking of making you cry with joy, so your wife is watching, as you can see.
Oh, my wife.
She posted that earlier, but you were talking, and I'm sure you didn't notice it. So I wanted you to be able to see that your wife is watching.
She's the best.
I also want the viewers to know that you have 100 academic publications, It just cracks me up that you refer to yourself as retired, because your post-retirement books include your memoir, The Purple Golf Cart, The Misadventures of a Lesbian Grandma, an historical novel about the last months of World War II entitled The Soldier, the Avatar, and the Holocaust. And you're currently working on Reader's Theater plays with LGBT and or historical themes. And you're working on a 4-part series. You have the book that you're holding up, and I'm gonna one up you right now and go like that. So this day in LGBTQ history, volume 1 is already on Amazon, and I know that you had initially started sharing social media posts that I guess have become the book.
Well, I guess it's been maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. I started doing this day in LGBTQ history. And just about every day I would put a snippet or 2 up, just look. And I always saved them. I hung on to them. Last year in 2020, I didn't do it. It's the first year I didn't do it in 7 or 8 years, whatever. And people kept saying, gosh, we really miss seeing the history, whatever. So I started doing it again this year. And I decided that I was going to take all this work that I've been compiling for the last 7 or 8 years, update what I could. I mean, some people unfortunately have died, so I had to get the right, dates of death and those sorts of things. But it turned out that in the first 3 months, we've got a 300-page book. Volume 2 is also a 300-page book, and it just came out this week. I haven't really even advertised it yet, but it's on Amazon now.
Well, congratulations. By the way, Barbara Carpenter participated in the 2004 Lavender graduation at the Claremont Colleges.
It's so sweet.
I want to invite the live viewers, if you have any more questions or comments, we're in the home stretch of the show. But Ronni, what I'd love to reflect on with you is the fact that really where we are today as a movement is because many of us risked everything, sometimes lost everything, forged through no matter what. We didn't take the easier, softer way. And we've ended up at places we never dreamed of. And that is to be celebrated. But the flip side of the coin is that the hatred against our community has never been greater, more ugly, and more overt where it still exists. And as you probably know the source of this, maybe it was Martin Luther King, but someone said, none of us are free until all of us are free. Right. So, and there are people all over the world that are experiencing hatred and discrimination. And even right in our own community, there are people that are trapped in families and churches that teach them to hate themselves. The work isn't done, but the answers are in the expression of our life force. And I'm just curious to know what you would like to say about that observation, and offer some sort of experience, strength, and hope in addition to everything we've talked about.
Yeah. Kelly and I have been, for the last 4 years, we have been committed to doing whatever we could politically in the broadest sense possible. And so today, politics is just so odd and so unusual and really pretty dangerous. But I think the best thing that we can do, and this is something that I've done from the day I lost custody of my children, is to be out. We teach people how to treat us. We teach people how to treat us. So if we're teaching people that we're afraid, that's how we're going to get treated. If we teach them that we're strong and we're powerful and we're confident about who we are, that's how we're going to be treated as well. And I think we should not be afraid to engage in conversation, but to be very clear that being in conversation with someone who's very, very right-wing is like arguing with a 2-year-old, and we're never going to win. And so, in those cases, I don't even engage. But we have to continue speaking out. For years, it was speaking out for LGBTQ students. And over the years, I've come to understanding, Kelly and I work very much together on being allies for all people. We cannot be allies for one group and put down another group. Can't do it. We lose our allyship. We've got to be open and allied with every person. It's just
embrace
that
the full intersectionality of humanity, and acknowledge that everyone, based upon their own intersections, has their own experience, which I have come to understand more than ever before is very different than my experience as a white male.
Right.
So totally.
Right. So what I'm hoping is that we as LGBTQ people will, and I hope all people will do this, but especially us, because I'm working on our history. I hope that you will write your story. Every one of you who can hear us, write your story. Don't let your life be gone when you leave us. Every single one of us is so powerful and so valuable. And there has to be some record that we were here. We were here.
And you're teaching.
I teach a memoir class. It's $35 for the entire class. I mean, it's
your website
Yeah.
address is on, so people can reach you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, go there. Sign. I got a class coming up. It's a 1-day class, 4 hours, 1 day, March 27th, $35. Can't beat it.
And if people see this after that date, there's always going to be more coming from Ronni. Right. So we have a comment that sort of is adversarial to what we've been discussing. And Mr. Gerardo says, actually, lefties act like children, considering how they want to cancel everything, including gender. Actually, we want to cancel bigotry, we want to cancel hate, and we want to cancel misunderstanding, and we want to create the freedom for people to live the lives that they were meant to live. And then Joy Silver, not necessarily in response to that, but she talks about another solution, building coalitions and resisting injustice. So there's always opposite sides, multiple sides of the coins. Right. And different perspectives. I'm grateful that you're watching, Mr. Gerardo. I'm not sure the things that we'll agree upon, but I just want you to note I put your comment on screen and was not at all censoring you. And let's all talk. Ronni, is there...
and that person, Mr. or Ms. Gerardo, has the option of being whoever they wish to be. It's really, it's Gerardo, Mr. Gerardo, it's perfectly okay for you to be a male person. We honor and we respect that.
So, that person happens to be comfortable with their gender identity and doesn't see any need to make adjustments in the way they live or express. Is there anything, Ronni, that you would like to discuss that we haven't talked about so far?
There's not a particular topic, but something that I would like to say, which may be another topic, is that I am blessed with 4 grandchildren. The 26-year-old is pansexual, a pansexual female is how she identifies. The 23-year-old is a bisexual female. The 11-year-old was born male but is female. And the 6-year-old is a rough and tumble little boy. And it's so interesting for me to have lived the life that I've lived and done the work that I've done, to know that these 4 children can move through at least our family's world in a place that's safe for them to grow up and be confident and feel good about who they are. And that's exactly what their lives are like. And not knowing back then that I would have these beautiful grandchildren, powerful grandchildren, I am grateful every single day for having had the opportunity to do the work that I've done, and to have paved the way for these 4 kids to be who they are and how they are in the world, whatever that means to them.
I think that that's the end of the show. I just want to tell you that I love you, I respect you,
I love you,
and
Nick.
I honor you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for those of you who are watching, go to RonniSanlo.com for more. And Ronni, if you stick right there, I'll talk to you briefly after the show.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much for being here, Ronni, as well. Just an amazing human being. I'm honored to know her, and I'm honored to know so many of the people who have tuned in today, people I know and love and trudge the activism road with, and some of them I trudge other roads with. Until next time, I'm Nicholas Snow.
Oh, 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 oh.